Okay, today's presentation is going to be Arguments on Why Stricter Gun Control is Necessary in the United States by Kyle Mueller. What is gun control? Gun control is a broad term that covers any sort of restriction on what firearms can be sold or bought, who can sell or buy, where you can sell or buy, and how you can use, transport, and store the firearm. Other types of gun control restrictions are on the types of ammunitions, attachments, and magazines. Gun violence in the U.S. The United States has the most guns per capita than any other country, 120.5 firearms per 100 people in 2017, compared to Canada's 34.7 guns per 100 people. The United States also has the highest gun homicides out of any other developed democracy in the world, 4.12 gun homicides a year per 100,000 in 2019 compared to Canada's 0.5 gun homicides per 100,000. More guns do not deter crime. No reliable study can find any conclusive causal link between more citizens carrying guns and a reduction in crime rates. David Hemenway, an expert in gun violence's impact on public health at Harvard University, said, "What guns do is make hostile interactions, robberies, assaults much more deadly." Out of all the scientists Hemenway polled, 84% agreed that having a gun in your home can increase your risk of suicide. 72% agreed that women in the home have an increased risk of being a victim of homicide. This is significant because it shows that scientists are not split on guns' position in society. Death in firearms. In 2019, 39,707 people died by firearm. 60% of those deaths were suicide. Firearms make up about half of all suicides in the United States. Homicides committed with a gun made up only 37% of firearm fatalities, but were the tool used by murderers in 75% of homicides. Guns have become the primary tool for a person to end their own or another's life across the nation. Suicide of firearms. At a Harvard University study showed that in areas with more guns, suicide rates were higher than in areas with lower gun ownership. In the words of David Hemenway, studies showed that most attempters act on impulse in moments of panic or despair. Once the acute feelings ease, 90% do not go on to die by suicide. Guns are undeniably more lethal than other common methods of suicide. Because people do not typically survive a suicide attempt involving a firearm, many people are dying. This is no small number. Suicides outnumbered homicides in the United States 2-1. Firearms and children. Firearms are only marginally behind motor vehicle crashes for the leading cause of death among children and adolescents. For children under 16, firearms are on the top of the list. Unlike general crime, children firearm deaths are primarily homicide, as opposed to suicide. Firearms in women. A woman's risk of being murdered are increased by 500% if a gun is present during a domestic dispute. American women are also 11.4 times more likely to be victims of firearm violence than women of any other high-income country. Concealed carry and the Second Amendment. On June 9th, 2016, the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled 7-4 that the right of the general public to carry a concealed firearm in public is not and never has been protected by the Second Amendment, thus upholding a law requiring a permitting process and a good cause for concealed carry licenses in California. Confusion in the analysis. On a topic such as gun control, it's important to note the trouble in analyzing these studies. There are numerous studies commonly used as counter-arguments to the statistics I have provided. These studies fail to establish any causal link and/or use skewed numbers because of the ambiguity of what is considered a terrorist act or gang violence, skewing the numbers for what they were using as their number of acts of gun violence. The studies I have presented were an attempt to select studies that rely the least on researchers to introduce their opinion as what constitutes gun violence in their study. Some studies, specifically the ones involving women, only use gender and whether the cause of death was a firearm-related injury. This is important as it allows little to no wiggle room to interpret the data and highlights the increased risk every American accepts, regardless of what your argument is to loosen or prevent future regulation. Conclusion. According to Friedrich Nietzsche, people are only beasts and strong beasts beat down the weaker ones, and that people are nothing more than nature in which the strong beat down and use the weaker. Holding on to these ideas, allowing gun ownership in America to increase is essentially arming both the weak and the strong beast, resulting in a society more deadly to all. Human nature is unpredictable. Men wanting power will always exist. Men clashing with weaker men will always happen. Adding guns into the mix produces a deadlier, less safe environment across all of society. And that concludes the presentation.